Gia, you were mentioning House managers. Well, basically, that's the team of lawmakers who are the prosecutors. The president has his defense and the Senate is the jury. Well, just like in a normal trial, the jury votes. And if 2/3 or more of them find him guilty, President Trump is removed from office and Vice President Mike Pence takes over as president. There was no appeal. So let's circle back to the votes. There are 67 senators needed to make 2/3. There are 47 Democrats in the Senate. So that means 20 Republicans we need to flip to hit that mark. Now remember, Democrats are trying to prove that the president abused his power by soliciting the interference of Ukraine in the 2020 presidential election. They're also trying to prove the president directed the defiance of subpoenas issued by the House of Representatives. Now the trial is expected to begin with a debate on how to organize the impeachment proceedings.
It may seem technical, but the key thing to look for in this debate is whether the Democrats are able to get approval for bringing in witnesses. The Democrats want to bring in former national security advisor to Donald Trump, Mr. Bolton. They'd also like to bring in the acting chief of staff, Mulcahy, because they think these witnesses are going to be damaging to the president.
All right, so that was Larry Jacobs. He's a professor of politics at the University of Minnesota. Now, a couple of rules laid out by Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Each side gets 24 hours over 2 days to present their case, and a vote is scheduled for next week on calling witnesses. But again, the trial starts today at noon.